Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining for another great Third Friday webinar. My name is Lisa Coy, and I am at the University of South Florida with the Just-in-Time Training Network. And today's topic is on schools and the law, hidden in plain sight, how schools can prevent and identify human trafficking and provide trauma-informed responses to child survivors. And I'm just going to give you a little bit of information about the Just-in-Time Training Network. We believe that every child deserves a home filled with safety, love, and unwavering support. And our commitment is to provide foster parents, caregivers, group home providers with training and resources that they need to be able to care for children in their care. If you're interested in finding out more about the Just-in-Time Training Network, you can visit our website at jittrainingnetwork.org/learn more, or you can email us at jitsupport@usf.edu. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Robin, and she's going to talk to us about the Survive and Thrive Advocacy Center.
Thank you, and welcome everyone. And thank you so much, Lisa, to you and to your USF Just-in-Time Training team for once more being our host for this event. We appreciate you so much. Welcome everyone. And one more time, I have to say this program today, I think will be one of the most eye-opening and mind-expanding programs that we've had. I think it's really an important issue to talk about human trafficking in the schools, and we're so grateful you're here. Let me start out with a little bit of information about STAC, the Survive and Thrive Advocacy Center. We assist all survivors of human trafficking, sex or labor trafficking, all ages, all immigration status, anyone, regardless of any sort of characterization or area. We're here. We provide something called care management. We used to call it case management, but people aren't cases and we provide care. So that's why we call it that. And the only way we do this, of course, is with many partners, many of whom I'm seeing on the roster today who've been joining us. As well as if we haven't worked with you, please know we're here. We're here as a program that does its work in the North Florida area. We're in the second judicial circuit or DC region. DCF region, sorry. But we also link to many in the state. We know that trafficking happens throughout our state and country and world, and we're often linking with partners all over the state, especially. We are endeavoring always to work more in our rural areas, and we've had programs on this, but sometimes people assume that trafficking doesn't happen in rural areas, and of course it does. We do community education, both online and in person. In fact, last year, I think our numbers were over 4,000 people a year or so that we train, and about 27,000 now in terms of STAC's history. And by the way, we're 11 years old this month. February is our birth month when we were incorporated. I can't believe it's been 11 years. So, our website is robust. It's a robust website with lots of information. So first of all, I was about to post that this program, as well as all of our webinars, and including the amazing symposium we had on January 29th here live, that is posted on our website. This program, if I forget to say it, this program will have the PowerPoint slide and 4 additional documents. There's a report, there's statutory language, all stuff so that it's going to be there for you, whether or not you want to listen to the recording. That's there now on the website, so don't feel like you've got to madly be writing down the names of laws and cases or things. It's going to be up there for you to just grab from the website. Please visit our website if you haven't. Please sign up for our newsletter if you haven't, because you will stay on top of all these things. We generally send an email twice a month. That's our usual, because we just want to really let you know about these programs and other stuff going on. So always look at the event page, and know that too, all of our services, including this program, are free. Next slide, please. Imagine Freedom is our podcast on our symposium that I just mentioned. We are doing that in January. There were individuals in town. We had 5 survivor leaders presenting. 5 of the 9 speakers were survivor leaders. I had the honor of interviewing 2 for our podcast that will be coming up soon. So that's another reason to get the newsletter and to check in on our website. But if you haven't done so already, these are podcasts where survivors talk to us about what they want us to know. What the reality is, what the real deal is on how we can do better, not only with our the children in our lives, but with everybody doing better, in order to prevent as well as help survivors, from the voices of our experts. So I really encourage you to take advantage. As they say, what do they say? Subscribe, rate, and review, please. So that's our podcast. Next slide, please. I mentioned all of our services are free, but I will tell you, they still cost they still cost money to produce. And so we really appreciate you if you are interested in helping in any way. Being a monthly donor at $5 a month will help us. If you can make a gift to support, if this or any webinar has been useful for you and you feel moved, I really ask you to consider making a gift to Stack, because again, it takes a village for us to do this work with our many partners, and we really would be so grateful, for your support. Next slide. Okay, so today, so let me start out by saying I don't think I have ever once, well, maybe once, done a presentation where someone hasn't said, what is going on in our schools? What are schools doing? And we always talk about this, and I have to say, and it's not just because I love the FSU College of Law, because I'm a graduate of the FSU College of Law. But I can tell you that the HELP project, the Human Exploitation Law Project, has done so much on this area of helping our laws change and our practices change in the state of Florida on human trafficking education in the schools. It's not an opinion, that is a fact. And we're so grateful that they're doing the work that they're doing here. I also wanted to put this in a little bit of context before we get started and share a couple of thoughts with you as I was preparing for this program and working with our speakers and just thinking. I wanted to share with you, and just a reminder, really, that first of all, human trafficking does not happen in a vacuum. It happens in communities where there are many different systems and places where traffickers take advantage of vulnerable people, and we know that our children and youth especially are vulnerable. So we know that the schools are very important. And as I was doing this work, I have to tell you, how many, if you can just say in the chat, has anybody read Virginia Giuffre's book? It's called Nobody Can't, I don't know, I can't seem to show it. Okay. Nobody's Girl. Virginia Roberts Giuffre is a survivor of Jeffrey Epstein. Has anybody read it? Yes, Ruby has. So when you hear and see and read about the Epstein survivors and what has happened, you may wonder and remember that these were children who were in schools. And as I was reading this one, and I just tell you, when you do this work and you're working with and around survivors, and our staff working with survivors all the time. Sometimes these are hard things to read. So I really encourage you to, if you do want to pick up this book and you're in this field or you work in any areas of abuse, it can be a really tough read. It's an important read, though. And what I kept thinking was, what happened in the schools when Virginia was in school and moving from school to school in different jurisdictions? What was happening as she was being physically and sexually abused? And then what happened as she was older and she was literally getting picked up by Epstein's, drivers and others from school and taken to his house. So I think those stories are replete in all of the different survivors as they've been talking. about their experiences. I also think we're getting a national teach-in on what grooming looks like from the courage of the survivors who are speaking out. So I really want to encourage you all, if you haven't, to really start paying attention. This is not a partisan issue. This is a power issue. This is an issue of abuse and exploitation that really just transcends any of those categories. And I'm really grateful to Virginia, and her voice and all the survivors who are speaking. So anyway, I just wanted to put that out there. So yes, Nobody's Girl is the name of the book, Virginia Roberts Giuffre. Okay, so that's my intro, and also a way of saying, yeah, schools are really, really important. The leader of the FSU team is Professor Paulo Anino. I'm happy to say that Paulo and I have known each other since law school. You were ahead of me though, Paulo. You were just a couple years ahead of me in law school. But it's really wonderful to think that we're still working together. So Paulo and Nino, as you can read their titles, what we decided to do today was I would introduce Paulo, and also Dr. Michelle Gale, and then we'll ask Paulo to introduce everyone. So Paulo, you're the first. I'll come right back to you. Let me introduce Dr. Michelle Gale, who's the Deputy Superintendent of Leon County Schools as well. Dr. Gale, welcome. We are so grateful to see you. Dr. Gale is a community leader. For those of you outside Leon County, you do not know how this woman is connected in our community, this leader, both in the schools. She has done so much to help promote this issue, both here and on the Commission on the Status of Women and Girls, where we work together. Dr. Gale is just a consummate professional. And again, Dr. Gale, what I'd like to do is not spend lots of time on intros, as we talked about, but I'd love for you to talk about what you're doing when you get to your part of the program, and do a little bit of self introduction as well. Just know that we are grateful for you and your talents, and thank you for
Thank
bringing them
you.
to us today. Now let me bunch back to Professor Anino. Paulo, I'd like to thank you again for all you're doing. You can see that just his titles are very, very long on this one slide. That you have been a leader in the area of standing up for children and children's rights for decades, all the way up to the Supreme Court, where you've been recognized, and all the way through all the work that you've done in establishing the Children's Advocacy Clinic, and doing what I think is some of the most powerful work, as you inform, educate, empower, expose the law students that come through your clinic with this information, because all of the people who you help, I know, are extremely vulnerable and are going to be fortified. Every single person you have helped, I know, and has been represented by the clinic, you've been doing anti-trafficking work, because you're empowering them so they will not be vulnerable. So with that, I want to turn the program over to you and this wonderful team of speakers. And thank you all again for being part of our Third Friday webinar series. So over to you, Paulo.
Thank you, Robin. And we're just honored to be invited to speak at this webinar, for many, many reasons. And number one is because what a big difference it does for our community. I want to introduce just quickly some of the students who work on the Human Trafficking Exploitation Law Project, who are just outstanding students at the law school. And so you'll be hearing today, after I talk, you'll be hearing today from Valerie Busto. She'll be talking on issues of what the new law is in Florida. So it's informing us, bringing us aware of what the new law is. And then after Valerie, we'll be hearing another stupendous student, and that is Annalisa Smith. And Annalisa will be talking about how these new laws, they just happened, but how are they being implemented right now in our school districts around the state? So we'll be hearing that. And then we're going to go to Emma Chapman, another stupendous student. And Emma, and with my colleague, Professor Emmeline Dalton, they're going to be talking about what's happening in the schools. What happens when you have survivors coming back into the schools? What's the interaction, and how should we be interacting with our survivors? So that will be then. And then we're honored to have Dr. Gale to talk about the perspective from the Leon County School District. with us too. So let me start off the talk. First, welcoming everyone to this webinar. We're here because of a tremendous opportunity, and that is we have a new law that passed just last year. And the new law is the Florida Human Trafficking Awareness Training Act. It's a new law. That new law completes kind of a many-year project started in 2019, where first we started requiring all children in Florida from kindergarten to 12, public schools, charter schools, to be starting to be educated about human trafficking, prevention, and how to spot human trafficking challenges. So we started with the children, requiring the children to be educated, and then last year, finally, with the help of two amazing students from the HELP project, which I need to give a shout out to, and that is Lauren Evans and Taz Walheimer. They worked with the legislature hand in hand and got the bill passed, Florida Human Trafficking Awareness Training Act, that requires all teachers, all school personnel in this huge state. We're the third largest state in the union, the huge state, to be trained on human trafficking identification and prevention. We are. Sometimes it's good to be the leader. We are the leader in the country when it comes to human trafficking prevention in the schools based on these laws. So I'm very proud of all of the students at FSU Human Trafficking Exploitation Law Project. So next slide, please. Why are we talking about trafficking of children and schools? I think the answer is the numbers. Florida, I said we're the third largest state in the union. Part of being the third largest state in the union, we have approximately 100,000 children who are survivors of sex trafficking in the state of Florida. 100,000 children, and approximately 125,000 children who are survivors of labor trafficking. So total, about 250,000 children. And in our FSU small project called HELP, Human Trafficking Exploitation Law Project, every week my colleague and I, Professor Emlyn Dalton, we're just constantly getting telephone calls of people traffic children needing help. So we've been seeing it in our little organization, and we knew it was happening out there, but I had no idea the dimension of what we're talking to until University of South Florida did a comprehensive study. Next slide, please. In the past, before the University of South Florida's lab report, we thought the numbers were fairly small. The Florida legislature, through their think tank called OPAPCA, said roughly 379 children are verified for sex trafficking. And they said that in 2025. And everyone who's a social scientist or anyone who's an advocate in this field knew that was malarkey, right? We all knew that there was a lot more kids because we're seeing a lot more kids in our day-to-day lives. We're seeing a lot more kids. So we knew those low numbers couldn't be true. But then also in 2025, the Department of Children and Family Services, they do their annual report on human trafficking. And they approximated about 2,254 children. Again, the social scientists in the community all knew that was wrong, but we didn't have any solid numbers until the University of South Florida lab report came out. And the reason why their lab report is really what I call a game changer, because they got data from every state agency. So it's no longer like it's in the past where we just got data from the abuse hotline. So if you didn't call the abuse hotline, it wasn't recorded. Here, they got data from Department of Juvenile Justice. They got data from Department of Corrections. They got data from Department of Health. They got medical data. They got nonprofit data. The Florida legislature made them the repository of all of Florida's information. So now we finally know what a dimension we have here in Florida, and it's scary, to be honest with you. And it really is the amount, because what this means, not just for my FSU Law School organization, but for the entire state, we really have to come up the scale tremendously. And so we're going to be talking about how to deal with 250,000 children who are survivors. Next slide, please. Why do we have so many children in Florida that are survivors? Well, part again is we're the third largest state. So part of that being the third largest state means you have a lot of folks. But also we have high percentage of poverty. So this is a fascinating state we live in. We have surpluses. Our economy in many ways is booming for different sectors, but at the same time, we have extreme poverty. So we have 18% of Florida children are in poverty. Then we have lots of homeless children in the school districts. So this is data from school districts around the state. Roughly 97,762 homeless children. So these are just examples of vulnerability that's uniquely Florida that we have that partially explains why we have so many children in the state or survivors. Next slide, please.
Can I ask you a real quick
yes.
question? Someone
yes, please do.
Does this include the undocumented?
Yes, okay. It does. So, and many undocumented are labor trafficking too. But we'll talk about that. Again, why so many trafficked children? I think the common denominator, and this is really important, the common denominator for the 250,000 is vulnerability. Now, a variety of different reasons why they're vulnerable, right? There is no iconic survivor. There is not. Professor Terry Coonan often in his talks will say that, and he's correct. There isn't any one type, but there's a variety of vulnerabilities, such as some survivors are vulnerable because of cognitive deficits. Some are vulnerable because of emotional deficits, because of physical deficits. There's some are vulnerable because of extreme poverty. Some are vulnerable because of homelessness. So you have many, many different reasons why children are vulnerable. And then there's the basic reason: they're children. Children are children. And that means that their brain is not fully developed yet until the age of roughly 20. They're still being developmentally building up. So their psychology is still, and character is still being formed. So they're more vulnerable to traffickers and others who wish to exploit them. And we'll talk about that in a minute. So what's the answer to this? Is one of the things the last line here says: reduce vulnerability, reduce trafficking. We know that with 250,000 children, we're not going to be able to prosecute our way out of this. There's just too many traffickers out there. So how do we need to do this? And I think the answer was given to us back in the year 2000. In the year 2000, Congress really was a momentous year, and that was when the Trafficking Victim Protection Act was originally passed. And it's been amended through the years. And one of the things that they amended it, they call the P's. So there's 4 P's. One P is protection. The goal of the act is to protect survivors of human trafficking. The second goal of the act is to prosecute the traffickers. And it's been doing that also. And the third goal of the act is prevention. And that's part of what we're working on. And then the fourth is partnership, the partnership like with STAC and other groups to achieve these goals. We've been working hard in the state in prosecuting, and I want to compliment the Florida FDLE and law enforcement for all they do in prosecuting, but the numbers are too high. We need to work on prevention. And the way of doing that is reduce vulnerability. We're going to reduce trafficking. So that's one of my takeaways for today. Next slide, please. Who are children survivors of trafficking, and we see these movies and these television shows, and they talk about women from Bulgaria or women from Romania or boys from Romania and stuff. In our experience, it's much different than that. There is no iconic survivor of trafficking, and so who are they? We can say a few things that are correct. One is they're exploited children. So if you want to know, you say, okay, how do I know a trafficked child is a child an exploited child? So exploitation is going to be a key concept to understand whether or not a child is trafficked. Are they being exploited? Next slide, please. And it's important now, because you can be exploited for money, or you could be exploited for other things, right? The issue is, are you being exploited for either sexual services or labor services, or both? So exploitation for what? For either sexual services or labor services, or both. What's another key ingredient or key element to understand trafficking in Florida? It requires commercial gain. So there has to be exploitation for sexual purposes or labor purposes for commercial gain. And commercial gain just doesn't mean money. It can mean goods, it can mean housing, it could be drugs, some type of gain. And this whole process involves recruiting of the child, transporting the child, harboring the child, housing the child, obtaining the child, soliciting the child, providing the child, enticing, grooming the child, all for the purposes of what? Exploitation. Now, federal government, other states, you'll hear this over and over again. Also for adults, you'll hear it over and over again. Well, we need to have force, fraud, or coercion. Force, fraud, or coercion. Force, fraud, or coercion. Over and over again, right? Here in Florida, you do not need for children force, fraud, or coercion. Okay, so what you need in Florida is you need exploitation. You need to have for the purpose of sexual services or labor services in order for commercial gain, and through this process of grooming and transportation harboring, as we discussed. Next slide, please. What are some specific predictors for trafficking of children? First, all children, by the fact that they're children, are vulnerable. So all children are vulnerable for trafficking. So we need to start that. And as Professor, but she should be a professor, as Professor Robbins said, that really, when we talk about trafficking, it's power, right? So what we're talking about is, what is the predictors? But some children have greater predictors, and that is those children who are survivors of compound trauma, who have been physically abused, sexually abused for a number of times. So it's not just one incident of trauma, but piled and piled and piled on top of each other. Those children are more susceptible to the grooming, to the vulnerability of the traffickers. Another group is our sexually abused children. In a DCF system, custody system, DCF system, I don't know, roughly at any one day, approximately 1,000 of the 20,000 children in the system are in the system because of sexual abuse, approximately 1,000. All those children in the DCF system and not in the DCF system who have been sexually abused, all of them have a greater susceptibility to being trafficked, especially if the sexual abuse occurred pre-adolescent. And then the third group that's really a red flag, is our chronic runaway children. And our chronic runaway children, we know quite a bit about them. Roughly 80% of our chronic runaway children are running away because of either physical violence at home, or they're running away because of sexual violence at home. And when they run away, where do they run to? They run to different communities in our cities, and traffickers are looking for them, lurking for them. And the traffickers, they approach these runaway kids and offer them food. They approach them and offer them clothing. Uh, they they begin what we call the grooming process, the grooming process, and so they offer the kids these different types of amenities, and then they also offer illegal stuff, right? They offer drugs and but places to live, and they groom the children into actually either what's called forced criminality, doing forced criminal acts like stealing for them, shoplifting for them, or to commit sexual services for payment. So again, these are three areas that when you encounter whatever work you do out there, you encounter kids who had compound trauma, sexual abuse, chronic runaway kids. Pause for a minute and say, okay, I know I deal with a lot of kids. I need to give special attention to this group. Okay. Next slide, please. What is the best way to reach children survivors? In my opinion, the best way is the public schools. Public schools, public schools. We have over 2,872,309 children in our Florida public school system. It's there. We can, next slide, please. And what do public schools do? And what they do well is teach, teach, teach. And we want the public schools to implement these new laws now in Florida. So this is not a case like some states where we don't have the laws yet that require the teaching of human trafficking prevention and identification for our children or for our teachers. We have the laws now. Now what needs to happen is like a rolling up the sleeves kind of thing. We need to actually implement the laws. And when I say we need to implement it, I mean, in your communities, you need to talk to your principals in your schools. You need to talk to your guidance counselors. You need to talk to your school board members. And let's go, and it's time for us to get to implement these new laws to really reduce the 250,000 children we have that have been trafficked. Next slide, please. And what to teach? Well, teach what trafficking is and how children can avoid both online and in-person trafficking. There's this online trafficking is happening now, depending on what statistics you look at, either 80% to 90% of all trafficking involves some type of online. So it's important for the children, especially children now who are spending so much time online, to understand how to avoid both online and in-person trafficking and how to identify it. And then empower students with coping skills and protocols to protect themselves. Again, we have this Hollywood media where they talk about being kidnapped and sent to South America and stuff. But a lot of the children who are being trafficked, at least in my community in North Florida, it's the grandmothers, it's the mothers, it's the stepfathers, the step-grandfathers, it's the neighbors. And then it's the cousins who are trafficking. And then what we have, we don't talk about it much. These kids are being traded and sold between different families and different folks. So it's not all international gangsters doing it. What we do know, a lot of trafficking is in the community. Okay, so empower students with coping skills and protocols to protect themselves. And a lot of times the best way of empowering students is, there's some really good animations now that's out there. I recently saw one that Stack put on. It was called Carter. And maybe Robin could talk about that one. I thought it was excellent. So there are some really good animations that would be helpful for children to see. And then also teach human trafficking prevention not as an extra burden or an add-on or something that's something that's a burden for the teacher or a burden for the school. The attitude should be this is an essential life skill for all children in our age in 2026. The numbers don't lie. We have a huge number. So we need to teach this essential life skill. Next, please. Next slide. And what else can schools do to prevent the trafficking of children? Provide extra mentorship and guidance to children who are at high risk of being trafficked, children with compound trauma, sexually abused children, homeless children, and chronic runaway. Yes, and these animations are excellent. One's called Carter's. It's excellent. There's another one called Mia, M-I-A, which I'm also very impressed with. Next slide, please. What can Florida schools do to help children who are survivors of trafficking? Well, you're going to hear about my colleagues. Emmeline Dalton will talk about that, and Emma Chapman will talk specifically on that topic. But what can Florida schools do to help children who are survivors of trafficking? This is really basic. It's fundamental. You got to separate the kid from the trafficker, because if you don't separate the kid from the trafficker, I tell you what's going to happen. And I'm not being catastrophic here. I know what's going to happen. The kid's not going to survive. You have to separate the kid from the trafficker. You have to do that. What's the first step to do that? The first step is calling the abuse hotline. And the number is 1-800-962-2873. If you're more of an online person, and there's the www.myfloridafamilies.com/services/abuse hotline. Okay. Call them up. Next slide, please. My mom worked in the public schools. I'm a product of the public schools. So, I love the public schools. So it's really important that the teachers and the personnel, these are your children. So call the abuse hotline. In 2024, only 7% of all trafficking reports came from school personnel. In contrast, 14% of all trafficking reports came from medical personnel. So schools can do better in calling the abuse hotline. Know your protocol for your school and follow your protocol. Now I'd like to turn to my colleague, Valerie Busto, and she's going to talk about some of these new laws that have passed. And thank you for spending the time with me.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for being here today. My name is Valerie Busto, and I'm very happy to be here. I'm a 2L law school student, and I'm Professor Nino student with the Children's Advocacy Law Clinic. I'm going to give you all a brief overview of the state's human trafficking awareness training requirement. So the Florida statute section 1006.481 is part of Florida's broader effort to make schools frontline responders to human trafficking. We at the clinic see this statute as recognizing that schools are one of the safest and can be one of the most consistent environments in a child's life. Our teachers always strive to make that true, and I think the legislative is trying to help as well. We'll talk in depth in this meeting about trauma-informed care and a trauma-informed approach to working with victims of child trafficking. But I just want to say quickly that trauma-informed, or the word trauma, is not in the Florida statute. So teachers, school personnel, parents, lawyers, everyone has to get a little creative and learn to apply trauma-informed care to these kids. Students who are being trafficked and exploited can experience fear, instability, coercion, abuse, and more. So rather than viewing their behavior as problematic, I think the statute is at least helping to raise awareness that some of those behaviors are signs of unmet needs or victimization. Next slide, please. So the history of training, the training requirement. And Nino gave a little bit of a prep to that. So the human trafficking awareness training requirement developed over a couple of years. In the fall of 2019, students from the Children's Advocacy Law Clinic advocated to the Florida Board of Education, and the rule was passed unanimously. Then the rule went into effect in November 2019, was amended in 2020, And by 2021, the statute was fully implemented statewide. And then on July 1st, 2025, the House Bill 1237 was passed and became law. This bill ultimately created Section 1006.481, it's a mouthful, of the Florida statute titled the Human Trafficking Awareness Training. So this progression, we think, reflects a growing understanding that children who are being trafficked often do not identify themselves as victims. So a trauma-informed school response focuses on ensuring safety for all kids, hopefully building trust, and of course, offering support. Next slide, please. Okay, so what the statute requires. Under the statute, every Florida public school must adopt and implement a human trafficking training curriculum for employees of the public school system. So the training must cover a couple of core topics: the definition of human trafficking, the difference between sex trafficking and labor trafficking, how to identify students who may be victims, staff responsibilities when it comes to reporting and responding, and then the required protocol for filing reports, like with the Department of Children and Families or the Human Trafficking Hotline. So from a trauma-informed perspective, the goal is not just identification, but safe and supportive intervention. So the staff are encouraged to avoid judgmental language, recognize that a child's behavior may be a survival response, prioritize safety and stability, and connect the student with appropriate services rather than relying solely on disciplinary measures after the fact. Next slide. Right. Next, who must be trained? So the statute applies really broadly here and essentially requires that every public school have training for absolutely anyone who has contact with students. So this could include instructional personnel, so teachers, administrative personnel like the front office staff members, and educational support staff. So think bus drivers, school cafeteria servers, coaches, the marching band director. Every employee must complete the training. They need to sign an acknowledgement, and the school needs to retain a copy of that completion. And the training must be conducted either in person or online. The statute is broad, we think, because any person in a school could become a trusted adult. So that could be a person that a child turns to potentially and might confide in. Next slide. Okay, lastly, the statute also requires age-appropriate instruction for curriculum for students K through 12. So under the State Board of Education Rule 6A-1.094124, schools must provide annual, developmentally suitable instruction on child trafficking for all their students K through 12. So at a minimum, public schools need to teach their students in an age-appropriate way, of course, recognition of human trafficking signs, awareness of resources, including national, state, and local resources, prevention of abuse of alcohol, nicotine, drugs, information on the prevalence, nature, and strategies to reduce the risk of human trafficking, and techniques to set healthy boundaries and how to safely seek assistance, and also information on how social media and mobile devices applications can be used for human trafficking. So the trauma-informed approach to this instruction focuses on personal safety, healthy boundaries, identifying trusted adults, and understanding coercion and manipulation. So ultimately, it's about empowering students, like Professor Nino said, to seek help without fear of punishment or shame. And now, next slide, please. Thank you. So in short, the Human Trafficking Awareness Statute recognizes that schools are often one of the first places where signs of trafficking appear, probably just because of the volume of adults to student ratio and the attention given to students. So by giving these trainings, it means that school staff have the knowledge to recognize signs that something is going on and then respond in ways that are safe, supportive, and trauma-informed. Again, the statute doesn't say that, but that's what we're pulling from it. So by shifting from punishment to protection, this statute helps schools become places where vulnerable students can be identified early and connect with the services they need. Thank you, guys. And now I'll turn over to our next presenter, Annalisa Smith.
Hi, everybody. My name is Annalisa, and I'm also a FSU law student working with Professor Paulo Anino in the HELP project. And today I'm just gonna discuss the implementation of the statutes and rules that Valerie just talked about. So Florida Statute 1003.4120G requires age-appropriate education of prevention of child sex abuse, exploitation, and human trafficking to students. And the DOE put out clarifications in 2023 about when it is appropriate to actually begin instruction. So I'm just kind of going to go through those clarifications and compare them with the teaching modules in the largest school districts in each region of Florida, and then also in Leon County, because that's where we are currently located. Next slide. So fourth graders should receive instruction that explains the negative impacts of the internet and social media, which would include human trafficking. Fifth grade, the clarification does not include any specific teaching about human trafficking, but it does emphasize the importance of forming healthy relationships, recognizing abusive behaviors, and developing appropriate responses to unwanted and unsafe threatening situations. Next slide. For sixth grade, they should receive instruction that includes recognizing and reporting signs of human trafficking and cyberbullying. And sixth graders should also receive instruction that includes human trafficking awareness and prevention. And seventh graders should receive instruction that includes human trafficking awareness and prevention. For eighth grade, they should receive instruction that includes the relationship between bullying, dating violence, human trafficking, and self-esteem. Instruction should include the compounding impact on mental health, such as depression, anxiety, loneliness, social isolation, and susceptibility to human trafficking. Additionally, eighth graders should learn how to determine situations when specific professional help services or providers may be required, such as situations with human trafficking. And students should be taught human trafficking awareness and prevention, including how to actually identify human trafficking when it's happening. And then 9th through 12th grade, instructions should include prevention of human trafficking by maintaining personal security and also recognizing and reporting signs of human trafficking. Now, we weren't able to make any public records requests to determine whether Florida schools are complying with the requirements, but schools for the most part post their learning modules and teaching guides for required instruction on health education on their respective websites. Next slide. So we know for Leon County School District that the school district provides on their website the modules and guides provided to teachers in health education, but they only do it for grades 6 through 12. And for grade 6, they include instruction on puberty and adolescent development, setting and respecting boundaries, healthy choices, affection and reproduction, and the importance of personal responsibility. For grade 7, they talk about human reproduction, STDs and HIV transmission, risky behaviors, effective decision-making to reduce the risk of teen pregnancy, and then respecting personal boundaries, including dating violence. In grade 8, they talk about characteristics of healthy and unhealthy relationships, the impact of social media on relationships. They talk a lot about consent and learning about sex abuse, assault, and harassment, and also relationship violence and sex trafficking. And they talk more about STD and HIV prevention and local resources to address those issues. And then from grades 9 to 12, they talk about analyzing healthy and unhealthy relationships. They talk extensively about decision-making skills, boundaries, and analyzing influences, and then more on STDs and HIV. Next slide, sorry. No, this is the right side. For Duval County schools, they do not directly address human trafficking, even among high school students. So in 5th grade, they're talking about puberty, hygiene, and reproductive health. In 6th grade, they talk about abstinence and setting boundaries in addition to what they talk about in 5th grade. In 7th grade, in addition to what they're talking about in 5th and 6th grade, they talk about understanding STDs, HIV, STIs, and pregnancy. In 8th grade, they talk about prevention methods along with everything listed before. And in 9th through 12th grade, they talk about responsible decision making and reproductive health in addition to everything discussed before. For Central Florida, Orange County Public Schools, this county utilizes the Monique Burr Foundation Teen Safety Matters curriculum for students 6th through 12th grade. And the curriculum covers how human trafficking prevention and digital safety, including social media, substance abuse prevention, life skills, and coping strategies for mental health and emotional wellness. And then for Miami-Dade Public Schools, from 2023 to 2024, the district implemented education on child abuse, exploitation, child trafficking prevention in every single grade from K through 12. So each school district in Florida is required to electronically submit a required instruction implementation form, but you can see in the template provided by the Department of Education. School districts are required to file an annual report on July 1st of every year and an annual implementation plan by December 1st of every year. That said, the annual implementation plans are required to be posted on the school district's webpage. However, as we have seen and talked about, most schools have not kept up with this requirement, and if they post any implementation plan, it's often outdated. Next slide. And then lastly, implementation of training to teachers. So Florida Statute 1006.481 requires that the Department of Education provides free training to teachers. So the DOE has provided free training that can be found on their website. And school personnel that have contact with students must receive the training and submit to the school an acknowledgement of having received the training. Now, schools are required to retain the acknowledgement of their training. And that is all from me on the implementation in Florida, and I'm going to pass it off to Emmeline Dalton.
My name is Professor Emmeline Dalton. I work at FSU College of Law with Professor Palomino and our wonderful students who've been speaking today. And I'm going to be talking about something that just kind of came to our attention here at the HELP Project, which is reintegrating survivors into the school system. So we've talked a lot today about recognizing students who are in school and recognizing those signs of trafficking and responding to, their unique needs. But something that we haven't talked a lot about is those survivors who haven't been in school due to their trafficking. So these are survivors who maybe have been identified by law enforcement agencies, the Department for Children and Families, kids who maybe, are 14 now and haven't been in school since they were 9 due to their trafficking because they're being, moved all over the state or potentially all over the country. And once these students are identified, they're, obviously we want to place them back in school. We want them to, get an education. But how do we help these students successfully reassimilate to the school environment that they are unfamiliar with? We have kids most of the time since they're 5 years old who are used to the routine and structure of a school day and school environment. And these survivors may have no experience with that, or the experience they do have is, not anything they remember. Some obstacles that these survivors face is that they're often not in their correct grade because they've been out of school for so long. So that can lead to, insecurity. It can lead to feeling, negative self-concept, things like that. They might be, like we said, unfamiliar with school and classroom procedures, unused to respecting authority figures. Their relationship to adults is often incredibly skewed. They're who they see, on their day-to-day basis is maybe their trafficker, adults that they are distrustful of. And so the idea of now having to listen to an adult that they don't know might be novel to them. And then I just wanted to highlight, these are unique circumstances which lead to unique struggles and require unique responses. Next slide. So next, I want to highlight some of the survivors' trauma-induced behaviors. So this is, behaviors we see from survivors that are caused by their trauma. So the first one we have here is hypervigilance and anxiety. And anxiety doesn't always look like nail biting or, curling up into the fetal position. It can look like being hypervigilant, hyper-focused on their surroundings, which can look like inattention. They can seem like they're not paying attention to their teachers, but really they are just so focused on, fight, flight, or freeze. What is going to come next that could potentially harm me? And I said, I just said fight, flight, or freeze, and I kind of want to highlight fight. If a student is feeling all of a sudden like I need to get out of here, something triggers them, anything like that happens, it can manifest in pushing a teacher, pushing a student, to try to get out of the room. And that can often be disciplined, criminalized, when the intent was not to harm, but the intent was, or the thought process was, I have to get out of here right now. The next behavior we have here is disassociation or disconnection. And this can be caused by PTSD and dissociative disorders. Related to the trauma, it can look like zoning out or spacing out, inattention again. But it's when a student just kind of like they're physically present in the room, but they are not mentally there anymore. Something happens, something maybe triggers them, and they have to just remove their mind from their physical location to, like as a self-protection mechanism. And this can look like disrespect as well. Next, we have emotional dysregulation. This is a big one, and it can encompass a lot of different behaviors, but it can involve like acting impulsively, emotions getting in the way of the child's setting goals, reaching goals, getting easily frustrated by what might seem like a small problem or annoyance, having trouble calming down once upset, mood swings, irritability. It can even look like just shutting down, or withdrawing. And one analogy I saw that I thought was very powerful and created good imagery was, imagine a soda can that's been shaken. When opened, everything bursts out. And that's how it feels for children experiencing emotional dysregulation. Next, we have lack of impulse control. This can look like, verbal. They can say things that they don't mean. They just comes out, no filter. Same with behaviors. They act before thinking. This can sometimes be associated with ADHD, which is next on the list. What I wanted to highlight with ADHD is that even just in recent years, we've had a lot more research about the difference in ADHD in boys and ADHD in girls. Most research up until, the last however many years was done on boys, and boys with ADHD, you think of like the hyperactive, running around, class clown. Girls manifest ADHD very differently. It can look like daydreaming quietly in class, feeling anxious. Maybe they are exhibiting silliness. Maybe they're the, talkative one that you put in the corner. Maybe they're just the perfectionist. So it's important to understand that ADHD can manifest in different ways, especially just based on gender. And another important thing about ADHD that I don't think is discussed a lot is ADHD is a very, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder actually covers a lot more than just those titles. ADHD involves executive dysfunction, which means that children and adults with ADHD, their mind just works differently. They're processing things differently. They're therefore reacting to things differently. Even when we think about, kids who are seen as procrastinators, but then at the last minute they get something done and turn out, a great work product. So that's executive dysfunction, which I think not everyone maybe associates with ADHD. The next one is negative self-concept, and I think this is really important because it can have a huge impact on a student's desire to even try in school. If they see themselves as stupid, they see themselves as worthless, they, any of those things, and then they do try to do a math problem. They do try to answer a reading prompt, and they get it wrong. And that just confirms to them, like, why should I even try? I am just as stupid as I thought I was. And this can be the result of sexual abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse that a lot of survivors, most survivors, all survivors experience. And then finally, we have insecure attachment and relational trauma. One of the most important things for a young child, age 0 to 5, to form is a secure attachment with a caregiver. And a secure attachment is a healthy and trusting bond with a reliable, consistent, and responsive caregiver. And most survivors of trafficking are never able to form a secure attachment with a caregiver, especially if we're looking at caregivers who are their traffickers or who know their traffickers. And this leads to, a skewed idea of what a healthy relationship is. We've talked a lot about how the survivors might be in love with their traffickers, or maybe they're being trafficked by a relative or a loved one, and that's what they think love looks like. So that can lead to a lot of issues forming relationships, healthy relationships with other students, teachers, administrators, and just anyone in their life. Next slide. So what I want to talk about now is when those behavioral manifestations of their traumas, behavioral issues, lead to disciplinary action in the school environment. And when survivors display these behaviors, we are seeing a lot of disciplinary action. And I want to take a moment to highlight the difference between punishment and discipline. When we think punishment, it's more punitive, so you're getting in trouble. And discipline is more of redirection, teaching moment, correction. And I think that's very important, especially with these survivors. We're not trying to punish them for bad behavior, which I wouldn't want to call it bad behavior, but these behavioral issues. We're trying to teach them how to better respond to stimuli that are maybe triggering, or just how to better, manage the school day, walk through life, and understand, normal interactions that they haven't been able to have because of their trafficking. And then, like we talked about on the last slide, negative self-concept is very common. And when they get negative feedback, it's going to reinforce that negative self-concept. And that doesn't mean that, like we, understanding the difference between punishment and discipline, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't redirect or correct. It just means that we need to do so from a trauma-informed perspective, and help them learn that messing up, having a failure, getting an answer wrong doesn't mean they're stupid. It means that they're learning. So I think that's incredibly important with survivors. But consistent negative feedback and formal disciplinary actions can increase vulnerability. Not only can it lead to re-traumatization, but it can lead to them returning to their traffickers. If they're feeling like, I can't do anything right, I'm not succeeding in school, why should I even be here? I'm done, I'm leaving. Next slide. So this slide and this entire conversation that I've been having about kids who, or that I've hopefully started about kids who aren't in school and then return to school, stems from a client we had and an incident we experienced at the clinic recently. So first I want to give an example of a school relationship agreement, which is what, this is an anonymous school, and this is their, policies for how students should treat staff and how students should treat other students. And when these, policies are broken, we see disciplinary action. And I've kind of by bolding highlighted what I think is most difficult for survivors to follow. So following procedures, communicating when there's an issue, communication with adults is often very difficult. They are untrustful, distrustful of adults. This last one on students treating staff, be coachable. I think that's very broad, and I, we see stubbornness. We see, they don't want to listen to authority. So being coachable kind of stands out to me as something that can be problematic for a survivor. And then on the other side, with students treating students, the last one, seeking staff to resolve peer-to-peer conflict. I think this is a incredibly problematic policy when it comes to trauma survivors and trafficking survivors, because like we've talked about, they don't trust adults. And they've been probably taught that when something bad happens to you, you handle it on your own. And we saw this in one of our own cases. We had a client who was being bullied. She was a survivor of trafficking, and she was being bullied based on her trauma. The other student was saying, bullying her based on the fact that she had a child. She was a teen mom as a result of her trafficking. And our client actually did reach out to adults and did reach out to school staff. And staff's response was a boilerplate response. It was a response that went along with their school policies, which was to have the girls sit down and talk it out. And that just wasn't the appropriate response for our client. This boilerplate answer didn't work for her. And what ended up happening was an unplanned physical altercation, and our client was facing expulsion. And when we had a meeting to discuss the expulsion, we brought up the fact that she's a survivor and that her trauma was being used against her, and administration just dismissed us completely. I want to acknowledge that might be due in part to desensitization of administrators to this trauma if they're seeing it often, especially in alternative schools, but also the importance of remaining empathetic to each child, because even if you are working with kids who have these experiences and you're working with them a lot, each child's experience is their own, and it's important to see them as individuals. And the school ended up, proceeding with expulsion for this child because she didn't, in their opinion, seek staff to resolve peer-to-peer conflict and resolve the conflict the way that they felt was appropriate, and weren't responsive to our attempted discussion of her trauma and trauma-based responses. So that is kind of what led to this discussion, because she had been out of school for 5 years, and was readjusting to school. And at this point, I want to turn the conversation over to my student, Emma Chapman, who is going to discuss one of the possibilities we've thought of for kind of not fixing, but helping with this problem.
Thank you, Professor Dalton. Good afternoon. So first, I just want to quickly point out something that Valerie discussed in her presentation, which is the importance of a trauma-informed response in the education system and in any field that you are working with people with trauma, which is really everywhere. And so taking a trauma-informed approach First, we can use the 4 Rs. We want to realize that there is a widespread prevalence of trauma. And so then we can recognize some of those behaviors that Professor Dalton talked about, how that is rooted from trauma. And then we want to respond and have this training for teachers so that we can resist the re-traumatization that Professor Dalton spoke of. So especially with these disciplinary measures, if students are suspended, expelled, this leaves them very vulnerable to going back to trafficking or their situations that led to their trauma in the first place. And so a really important mindset when thinking about trauma-informed responses is shifting from what's wrong with you to what happened to you and how can I help? And so the National Education Association has some great information on how you can apply these trauma-informed responses in schools. And the first thing that's really important is making sure that schools are trained in trauma-informed practices, or TIP, and that this is across all aspects of schooling. Like Valerie mentioned before, it's not just, teachers in the homeroom or that direct relation. We want all people, from counselors to the administration to bus drivers, that all the processes related to schools would be trauma-informed. And then giving students a safe space to share and express their feelings and build relationships. That goes to what Professor Dalton was talking about, that these survivors do not feel like they can trust adults. They have had adults who have taken advantage of them, maybe for their entire life, and they've maybe never had a secure attachment and someone that's been there to protect them and help them grow. And so educators are in a unique position to do this. But we also want to emphasize that this is not just a heavy burden on the teachers. This has to be taken up by the legislature, by the school boards, by the administration to better equip teachers, because we know that they're already burdened. And then this quote is pretty helpful. It says, seeing an abused child through the lens of their traumatic experiences, as opposed to only their symptoms or behaviors, allows for effective interventions and competent trauma-informed care. And after I go, I'll also be putting some links in the chat if you want to look further. And so one way that we have identified a way for survivors to have potentially better insulation from disciplinary measures that re-traumatize them or leave them victimized again is through 504 plans. So 504 plans come from a civil rights law that assures students with disabilities have educational opportunities and benefits equal to those provided to students without disabilities. And so this is separate from an IEP plan. And the reason that we've highlighted 504 plans is because for IEP plans, you have to fall into one of 13 distinct categories that are listed. However, for a 504 plan, to qualify, a student must have a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. So there's not the bounds of having 13 specific different disabilities. Here, anything that can impair this major life activity in the schools can count for getting a 504 plan. I'll go quickly and I'll put some links in the chat and that explain 504 plans more and the protections that it could afford survivors and those with trauma. So you can see this here, and this PowerPoint will be on the website, that school systems have their own evaluation and standards and procedures for awarding a 504 plan to a student. And so you don't just qualify by having a medical diagnosis, there must be an evaluation. And then again, I can put some information, but these are just a few examples of a part of the 504 plan is helping the student have better success in the first place so that they don't get to the emotional outbursts or the behaviors that Professor Dalton spoke of. And it equips educators to know better what these students need. So before the disciplinary measures occur. And so these are some of the examples. And then there are some specific things that the 504 plans do relate to discipline. So I'll highlight the most important thing is that a student with a 504 plan, if they are facing a significant change in placement, which is an expulsion or suspension exceeding 10 days, they are eligible for a manifestation determination review. And so if the misconduct was caused by or directly and substantially related to the student's disability or a direct result of the school's failure to implement the student's 504 plan, the student cannot be subjected to the disciplinary action and the change in placement. So this is an incredible opportunity to help protect our survivors and keep them in the schools where we want them to be able to learn and grow and re-engage. And so I'll go ahead and pass it over to Dr. G to tell us more about what's going on in the Leon County schools.
Excellent. Thank you. I've really enjoyed this presentation, even more so because of what we're doing in Leon County schools. Robin, keep me good on time. I know that we're under a time limit here, and I'm just going to try and bring it home as much as I can. My name is Dr. Michelle Gale, and I proudly serve as the Deputy Superintendent of Leon County Schools. We are a mid-sized district. Some people may call us a small district, but we are in Florida's capital county. We also, our school district is a part of the 32304 zip code, which I think everybody has heard about as being one of the poorest zip codes, actually the poorest zip code in the state of Florida. I'm going to try and bring it all in. Before it was actually the law, the state statute, which was quoted, was 1006.481. Leon County Schools was training our teachers and our students, especially our students, on age-appropriate signals of human trafficking. In addition to that, we partner with the Survive and Thrive Advocacy Center. We've had Robin Hessler-Thompson come to our school board, as well as to provide training, additional training for our administrators and our parents. One of the things that, and I know Robin will put that there for you, talking with youth about human trafficking. This is something that is used throughout the school district just about every day, because sometimes adults, parents, grandparents don't know how to talk to their child, grandchild, niece, nephew about human trafficking. So we have been training for a number of years, and we use age-appropriate materials for all of our students. Now, there was a quote of the reported amount of homeless kids in the state of Florida, which is the fourth largest state in the union. Right now, we have 768, we call them FIT, families in transition, that are reporting. It's probably a whole lot more, but pride goes into that. I'm just having a hard time right now. I'm not homeless. I'm just staying with my brother or staying with another family member. And those kids are very vulnerable. We also have right now 76 kids, and that's a low number for this time of year, in foster care. Now, I feel good about that number because with the foster care system, there's a lot of protocols that you have to follow. We have a very, I'd like to say, great attendance team, because a lot of things with our vulnerable kids actually starts with a pattern of non-attendance. State statute requires that teachers reach out to the families at first. If that's not successful, then we can go to administrators, either at the school level, district level, and we have a small but mighty attendance team that is also trained on human trafficking. So when they go to the home, or at least the last address that we have in place for the child, there are certain things that they're looking for. Small but mighty, they're a team of two. It's hard to believe for the entire school district, but a team of two. All of our staff are trained, faculty and staff, teachers, bus drivers, paraprofessionals, in mental health first aid. And that is a part of trauma-informed response. One of the things that we find, and this is really hard with kids who are have been subjected to human trafficking, whether it's labor or sex or both, we try and form relationships with our kids. We try and make sure that we connect them as much as possible. But we're not naive enough to think that with these kids, they don't trust adults. So it's a little bit harder to do that. We have a very strong volunteer and mentor program in Leon County schools. We also use the multi-tier system of support. We have MTSS meetings wherein we discuss our kids that we're seeing that they may be having some challenges. In fact, before I mention that, we also have social workers that are assigned to all of our schools. In our secondary schools, the social workers are there every day. They're not itinerant. They're there every day. And we're working hard, our superintendent and the board, to keep that in place with budget cuts. So we're working hard on that. But for our child study team meetings, our MTSS meetings, we had one yesterday where our one of our social workers was on that call, and this was a child who she's in foster care now, but she is re-entering the public school system through foster care. And so we want to make sure that we're putting resources in place and that we're watching this child very carefully. We want to make sure that our teachers, staff, parents, students, everybody, they know what to look for with human trafficking. Because if you don't know what you're looking for, you don't know what you're seeing. Okay, we're not naive enough to know that things don't go on within the school system, but we put measures into place in Leon County schools so that we're aware and we have resources readily available to address those concerns. We also look for missing kids. Right now, my role as deputy superintendent, a lot of the things that impact human trafficking fall under my umbrella. One of them is Florida's Missing Children report. Right now, we have 4 kids that are on that report that could be in Leon County schools, and we do search for them, making sure that we are identifying those kids and getting them back to where they should be. I'm trying to think. We talked about so much, and I just want to make sure that you know some of the things that we're doing in Leon County schools to reduce that vulnerability that seems to continue to be a thread throughout this conversation. That's building relationships, providing those supports, partnering with community agencies such as the one that Robin Hessler Thompson leads, and making sure that we're on top of this as much as possible every day. I see Robin's camera came on. I think that's my cue. I had a lot more to share, but I thank you for this opportunity.
We need more time. We need more time, and we've got 3 minutes until we have to wrap. I'm so sorry. Madeline says we need a part 2. Hey, okay. I'm gonna. Do you all think we should do a part 2 on this? Because I feel like we cut Emma short. We need to know more about those plans because, okay, so we'll do a part 2. So let's do that. Now, let's right now do some quick questions, and I'm gonna do kind of rapid fire, and I'm gonna ask the FSU team. First of all, thank all of you for all of this. I mean, this is one of I mean, all these. I've been at all of these. This is really one of the best programs we've had. And I have been hearing people say things they don't say about how informative. Never been on a program so informative. So if y'all want to put your cameras back on, let's just say, everyone, thank you, please, to everybody. And we will do a part 2 on this. So thank you. And thank you, Dr. Gale. So sorry to cut you short there. We're going to do a part 2. And if you all want to right now, as we're just wrapping this, put in the chat. Lisa saves the chat for us. If you want to see other parts of this covered, please do. One of the questions was, does this training take place on military bases? And I think they meant in the school's military bases. Do we know that? Do we know if it happens?
I think Department of Defense has to follow all, if not all, many, if not all of our required instruction.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good to know. So any place, so that's answer to that question. Somebody asked about good touch, bad touch, and how that is sort of translated, or does this issue kind of, I think the implication to that question is, does this issue get covered when we start to talk good touch, bad touch?
So I can speak from a Leon County Schools standpoint.
Yes.
That's one of the age appropriate things.
Good.
When we talk about human trafficking and when we talk about other sexual contact that should not be taking place. So yes, it is covered.
Okay, great, great. And I think we answered the other questions in the Q&A with just typing answers. And so we got that done. So thank you on that. Now, I want to unfortunately wrap up, but with the promise to all of you and to our speakers that and Professor Anino is a part
Yes.
2, and Professor Dalton a part 2, a possibility for us sometime
Yes, a
this year.
definite possibility. Yes.
Okay, we'll work on that because we know you got a couple other things going on there during the semester. So
Yes.
thank you for that. Go back to what you said at the top of the number of students that are labor trafficked. We didn't really talk about labor trafficking, and we need to do that. I think our minds always go to sex trafficking of children, and there's just no time. You mentioned it. We've opened the door. I think people looking at the numbers who are trafficked in Florida from that report is so powerful that there's no way we can't do a part 2, everybody. I mean, we just really have to do it. So I thank you for that. We've got time to figure it out. And any closing thoughts, team?
Just thank you, Robin, and thank you, Dr. Gale, for participating. And next time I'll definitely cut my talk shorter. So I apologize. I
was
apologize
great.
on that.
Do not apologize. It was great.
I think this was fabulous information. We thank you all so much, and we'll see you next month from St. Pete. All right. Have a good weekend, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank
Okay.
you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.